Jazz Forward is a new live music agency. Established musicians and multi-instrumentalists Marianne McGregor, Malcolm MacFarlane and Sophie Bancroft, along with music journalist Fiona McTaggart, have come together to showcase some of the exciting original music and diverse musical talent to be found in Scottish jazz. Jazz Forward is funded by Creative Scotland. Episode 3. What influences your creative work?
I suppose I've always read a lot, and I always, from a very young age, used to read about 4 books at a time, and I would spread it out and have, something really obscure or difficult, like the St. James version of the Bible, and read it from front to back, or I don't know, something really big or philosophical or religious or something, and then I'd be reading maybe an autobiography, and then I'd be reading a reasonably meaty novel, and then I'd have some fluff, and I'd be dipping in and out of them all the time, reading into the night, just about every night. I was chronically exhausted, and that was from quite a young age. So I'm sure that all of that reading has fed in somewhere. As I've got older, and especially kind of going to university, I've read less because I needed to focus on the university stuff, and then my professional life afterwards, I had to keep reading about all that. So now I don't read an awful lot. I read music magazines, for example, and the London Review of Books, which is, I don't know if you know it, but it's a fantastic it's not really just about books. There's politics, history, all sorts going on in it. It's like a newspaper, just absolutely brilliant. And there's some very, very great writers that appear in that. I suppose one person, if I could think of one writer, and he's not specifically thought of as a writer, but Noam Chomsky is someone that I like to read and haven't read enough of, because the more I read, the more I just think, yes, he's absolutely on the money. So I suppose that's not so much about style of writing, but just what he embodies, what his value systems are, and also that he does seem to be fearless in saying what he actually thinks. So in terms of, I tend to think of myself as a bit of a frothy writer. I'm so enthusiastic and so excited about the music that I write about. I'm not sure where that comes from, except that's just me just being beside myself with excitement about it. So I'm trying to think, who did I get that from? I'm not sure who. I don't know.
But it's a lovely, it's a lovely sort of honesty, though, isn't it? Which is a great energy in your writing, I think.
Well, that's nice of you to say. That's very kind.
It feels like you're reading you, which is always a good thing, I think.
I think it's good to try and be yourself, and I think that's extremely hard. I find that very difficult because my personality is such that I want to be liked, and ideally respected, but definitely liked. And you can't necessarily be liked, when you're writing. But I have to say, when I do write about, say, live reviews or reviews of albums, I would try and miss out the bits that I didn't do it for me, and I would focus on the parts that I saw as the strengths. So, because I don't think there's any help or any advantage to be gained from focusing on the negative for people. People have enough negative stuff going on from elsewhere, including in their own heads. And I think that it's much more helpful to focus on the positives. So if I was asked to write about someone or some music that I couldn't feel that I could write positively about, I would say no, because I think there'd be someone else who would be able to find the positives in it. And I just have such a huge respect for the courage of musicians to actually put their work out there, because that's their babies, that's their creation, that's part of their core self. And to actually put that on display is a huge risk. And that's an amazing demonstration of their bravery, their courage. So I respect that, and I don't want to hurt people like that.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. And I mean, certainly from being on the other side of the fence, that's a fantastic, standpoint. And I know as a younger musician, some of the negative reviews can really, really cut deeply, actually. And really cause insecurities, and at the end of the day, it's one person's viewpoint, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's entirely subjective.
Yeah.
Because you could read different reviews about, say, a live appearance by a band, and you'd get a bunch of different opinions. And it's wholly subjective.
Yeah.
And even experienced writers can get it completely wrong because they might be in a bad mood, or the band might be having an off time because one of them's got something they're worried about, or they're sick, or they haven't slept all night, or there could be all sorts of reasons to do,
Yeah.
or the environment wasn't right for it, and so it didn't work.
Yeah.
We're all subjective human beings, and to say that we're rational and conscious of what motivates us, including in how we write, that's just rubbish. There's an awful lot going on, behind the scenes that we don't know.
Yeah. No, it's lovely. That's lovely.
In a blue room I may lie, with dancing shadows on the walls, like clouds rolling by, and they beckon with their shapes, bringing dragons to my world, and colouring in the players as they leave behind.
Tell me about your influences in your creative work.
For me, as a young woman, I read a lot of self-help books, which were kind of my saviours, really, at the time when I was quite screwed up in my head. And reading about other people's experience, other women's particularly experiences, I found that extraordinarily powerful and useful. And I did a lot of journaling at that stage in my life, and I always had a sense that what I wanted to do was to communicate in a way that would be helpful for other people somehow, in the way that I had received it. So there was that slant, and then also, music that just moved me so thoroughly, of which there's so much. But I mean, people like Ricky Lee Jones, for example, would just get right to my core. Instrumental tended to be piano players, so Keith Jarrett, Bill Evans,
Yes.
more recently Brad Mehldau. Completely, the way they play just really strikes me right in the core of my soul, I suppose. And so I think those have been major influences on me. And then I've packaged them up in my own way. But they're things that stand out to me. And Pat Metheny as well, I found, has been very, just the sort of the joy his stuff, his music releases in me. So it's that, it's always been that drive to try and communicate in a way that will move other people somehow. Or and that's a hope, but I suppose it's kind of a little bit like what you're talking about. It's being honest about my experiences, then and finding that actually does move other people is a lovely thing. So I think some of those influences I've had have helped me feel confident in doing that, really.
And I would say you do it really well, Sophie. Sorry interrupting, but you definitely do that. So just to give some feedback, I would say all the time, that's a key part of what anyone would see in your work.
Yeah, no, well, that's good to hear. I mean, it's definitely, and I mean, I think I once heard a quote: "If you, as long as you like what you're doing, that's the most important thing. Because if no one else likes it, at least you do." And that once I learned to trust that took away a lot of anxiety for me as a creative person. That took a while to get to that point, but and then it's nice to realise that other people enjoy it in different ways. So. Who have been your biggest influences, would you say, or are your biggest influences?
Yeah, I mean that's really tricky because there's so many. I mean, because obviously, like jazz is my kind of main thing, if you like. But then along the way, you just kind of get there's so much other music that you get exposed to that you like and that you can learn from and that you enjoy. So I mean, I would say that actually, funny in some ways, the same influences from when I was 17 are still there, like Wes Montgomery, John Scofield, John McLaughlin, those guys, but also a whole lot of other people, and even in different genres, classical music and world music. That slightly odd term, but that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's all. I suppose my interests are pretty wide, really.
And when you're listening nowadays, does it embrace that breadth of?
It does, yeah. I mean, to be honest, maybe much like yourself, I don't actually get that much time to listen.
Yeah.
But I definitely make the effort to check things out. I mean, I've been listening to a lot of just names I've not been that familiar with. A lot of contemporary classical stuff that I've maybe got a few. Well, inevitably got a few gaps in my listening there, but and the other time is like if I'm in the car, I'll have a CD in the car, but I suppose I won't be closely listening to that, but I'll be checking it out, But
I think it's difficult when you work when you're doing a lot of teaching stuff and you're listening to music all day. The last thing you want to go and do is listen to music sometimes.
But I do. I mean, I definitely like to listen, and but I know what you mean, that you can kind of get to saturation point with that. But I do also try and keep checking out contemporary music, because I think there's so much great music going on, and with YouTube and all those kind of things, there's an amazing amount of creativity out there. Over all kinds of genres and styles and all the rest of it. There's some I can't remember their name, but I mean, there was something I came across the other day, and it was just unlike anything I'd ever heard before.
Yeah,
and that's great.
It's
that's refreshing.
It's so exciting, isn't it, when you hear something that just takes your breath away?
Yeah, and it can be anything. It can be pop music. I don't have any kind of I know that there some people look down at pop music or rock music, but there's so much creativity there in amongst the the good people, that it's still a lot of get a lot of inspiration from.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I had it's not pop music at all, but I had a period of time where I was working with a electronic band, so I was writing. They would send me loops of samples that they were putting together, and then I would write melody and lyric, and sort of I was using Cubase at the time, and I'd chop up make building blocks and then send them back on. And that was, and I found that so amazing, because it was stepping out of the rules that I felt slightly restricted in through writing as a jazz singer. And and having that repetition and the groove as the sort of the main driving force. Stepping out of the rules and the path that I'd always walked on, I found so educational, actually, for me as a songwriter.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that people put music together now is very different, and a lot of people, it is possible for people to make something that sounds like music that's not very good. But then on the other hand, there are some people who do these things with loops and samples and technology that are incredible. I mean, even people like Kanye West, who gets a lot of stick, perhaps quite rightly for some things. He's an incredibly creative guy. It's what he does sonically with the things is amazing, and also guys like Aphex Twin and loads and loads of people, and it's a different way of working, and I think that's where maybe I don't know whether people feel threatened by that or feel that it's it's different, so it's not as good. But actually, there's some amazing stuff going on. And it's nice to work in a different way, isn't it? It's nice to
absolutely
to say, okay, it's not like an AABA standard. I'm going to have to do something else. I'm going to have to. What can I do that would contribute something? So it's good.
It makes it much richer somehow.
It can hurt if it's happening to someone else. You gotta try to sympathize. Stop giving yourself such a hard time. Take a deep breath and count to 10. Then start again.
So who would you say have been or are your biggest influences for you as a creative person?
It's tricky because I take a lot of influence from not only singers but instrumental music as well, because improvising and scat singing is so much of what I do. But Ella's a big one with her scat singing ability that is just mind-blowing. So Ella Fitzgerald. I had a big Billie Holiday phase when I was a teenager where I was just obsessed with the phrasing and obsessed with learning a jazz standard as it's written and then hearing how Billie Holiday does it and it just being so different and so perfect.
Yeah.
Sarah Vaughan, Nina Simone, like all the kind of ones you would expect. And then in more recent years, there's Amy Winehouse, Esperanza Spalding, Madeleine Peru. Like there's lots of these great female jazz artists.
Yeah.
And they're also different, and I think that's good. It's just a wide range of...
Yes, yeah. And what about instrumentalists? Which ones have been...
Oh no, you're putting me on the spot. All the great trumpet players like Miles Davis.
Right, okay.
Louis Armstrong.
Do you think that's because it's so close to voice?
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if you would agree, but when I'm doing my scat singing, I'm picturing myself as a trumpet. Like,
right,
that's where my phrasing and the feel comes from. And I do some like quite staccato sounds, and I think that's from the influence of listening to so many of the famous trumpeters.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. No, that's cool. And I mean, have you listened to much of Chet Baker? Do you like what he does?
Yeah, I do.
What he did?
And I also really like his singing as well.
Yeah, because I found him extraordinary the way it was so close to his playing, wasn't it?
And it's just so emotional, everything about it. Yeah.
No, absolutely stunning. And Miles Davis, just extraordinary. In fact, I met him once.
Really?
I worked at the Glasgow Jazz Festival
Nice.
on the year he was performing at the SECC, and I was asked to go and look after him while he was waiting for his limo after the gig.
Nice.
And we were walking down the big back, the hall at the back of the SECC, which is massive. And he was tiny. He was like half my height, and he had the big sequined back on his jacket. You know, and he held my hand. He was very old, like, and he spoke sort of like kind of like that. And Mark Marnie, the photographer, was behind us, and he was really annoyed because it would have been an amazing photograph because I was literally twice his height. and it was just at a point, it was before digital cameras, and it was just at a point he was just in the process of changing his film. This podcast features excerpts of music written by Sophie Bancroft, Malcolm MacFarlane and Marianne McGregor. You can find more information about Jazz Forward at jazzforward.scot.